Do you know how many kids you've had and like how
40.
long 40 kids?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
over
40.
15 years it was?
Right.
And of those 40, how many are you still in contact with?
That's interesting. Don and I had the philosophy, and we told each child when they left that we would never try to find them or try to connect with them, because it was a difficult time in their life, and if they wanted to put that behind them, they had every right to do that and make it go away, and there wasn't
Wow.
anything that we would ever do to
Mm-hmm.
to disrupt that. However, there would never be a time that they couldn't reach out to us and we'd be there. So
Yeah.
we left it entirely to them. And consequently, the little kids that we had, disappeared.
Yeah.
We don't know
Yeah.
what happened to them. The older kids, especially since Facebook has been around,
Yep.
I'm in some daily contact with some kids.
Yeah.
Before Facebook, there was one kid who aged out, went to UC, stayed there for a year. That wasn't it, kind of went in the Army for a while, just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
but that kid would wind up, he'd be sitting in my family room. I'd come home and there he was watching TV, I said, what's for dinner? And this went on for several years.
Wow.
It was still home, and he
Yep.
would just pop up every once in a
Yep.
while. So I think of the kids that most of the kids that I'm still in contact with are through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, Ashley and I have talked for years about wanting to have a reunion, and we should do
Wow.
this, we should have a reunion. And so this Christmas time, I said, okay, we're doing it. We're going to send out invitations to anybody that I have contact with and
Mm-hmm.
say, it's going to be here. It's a potluck. Come to our house, and, we'll just kind of get to know each other.
Yeah.
3 girls showed up. 2 of the girls were both pregnant and due on the same day.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? They didn't know each other at all.
Wow. So the kids that I remember, there are a handful that I do. I remember, and of course I won't use names. It was probably when I was a teenager, and it was a younger girl, and she had attachment issues, but it wasn't in the way that I would have initially thought. And now going through training, I know what healthy attachment is. But I remember her overly attaching to people.
Mm-hmm.
In like an unsafe way. And then that came up again when I was an adult, and my dad and, his wife were
Mm-hmm.
looking to adopt. And I saw those same kind of attachment issues in her. So I
Mm-hmm.
was a little bit familiar with it, but what kind of different behaviors, since you were a therapeutic home, what kind of behaviors did you see and work through? And what were some of the more challenging times that really stick out to you?
I mean, there was aggressive stuff. There were some kids that were very angry and acting out, who would, throw things at us and destroy property, and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. That usually, and as you know from being in this, there's this wonderful honeymoon period,
Mm-hmm.
where the first few days, weeks that you have them, they are an absolute model child, and you
Mm-hmm.
think, why did they write all those lies on the paperwork? Because
Mm-hmm.
this kid would never do that.
Yeah.
So you have that wonderful period of time, and then that immediately goes into this testing phase. And
Mm-hmm.
for some kids, there wasn't much to it at all, because they figured, this is a really nice home and this is better than any place I've been. I'm not going to blow it. And so
Mm-hmm.
the testing didn't really come up too much.
Mm-hmm.
But for some, they were relentless in, I'm going to make you prove that you care about me.
Yeah.
You know,
And so
it,
what kept you, so talk about that, because I think for some people who aren't prepared for that testing and maybe some of those behaviors, they would see that and then disrupt the placement and have that child end up going to a different home where they would follow that same cycle. And that's kind of one of the reasons why kids, have so many homes that they're going through. So what prepared you guys to really deal with that and overcome it with those kids?
we were pretty upfront with them. I mean, certainly not the first few. The first few, you make some horrible mistakes with. But
Mhm.
once we kind of got our feet wet and we knew what we were doing,
Wait, you're saying that you mess up?
like every day,
Yeah. That's normal. It's normal.
you lay in bed and you say, wow, I really screwed that one up,
Yep.
didn't I?
I've been there. Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Like, I wish that hadn't come out of my mouth, but it did, and I'm
Yep.
human. We pretty much set up front, we've been here, we know the things you're going to do. You're probably going to try to steal from us. Although I don't like that, that's not a deal breaker. That won't make us push out of here.
Mhm.
There's other kids in the house. There's probably going to be skirmishes between the two of you. That happens between kids. If you deliberately hurt somebody, we're going to have to talk about that seriously. But,
Mhm.
I understand that you're going to fight with your foster siblings, and that's not
Mhm.
going to put you out of here. So just kind of being upfront and say, we love you and we care about you, or you wouldn't be here to begin with. So
Mhm.
let's not play these games,
Yeah.
let's
So
just,
like lay out the worst case
yeah,
scenarios of what they could do and then tell them and you won't go anywhere. And
right. And you
then
don't go anywhere. Yeah.
you live up to that, which
Hmm.
builds trust with them, and that's huge for these kids.
Yeah. I think the people that I see who get into foster care that really kind of frighten me are the ones who put this, I'm doing something wonderful for you because you just are such a poor, pathetic little person,
Yeah.
and I have these perfect, wonderful children, and
Mhm.
then you're that other kind of kid.
Yeah.
It's all wrong for so many reasons. If
Yep.
you don't genuinely love kids and have an understanding that they come in all colors and shapes and sizes and weirdnesses, then this isn't for you.
Yeah. Yep.
And it has to be real. It can't be, I want to do something nice.
Mhm. Yep. Well,
It's
and
got to be much more than
yeah, not everyone is cut out to be a foster parent. At the same time, when people say, "Oh, I could never do what you do," it's like, well, don't put me on a pedestal because, I'm not perfect. Like we're not perfect. But
that.
you do have to have certain characteristics. I'm still trying to figure out how to attract those families to do
Right,
this,
right.
because that's really what's going to be making the difference overall. I
That's
had a
kind of a
thought.
nice segue into well, there's two programs that Don and I tried to get started, and this is towards the end when we knew that we didn't necessarily want to have kids in our home forever, but
Yeah.
we wanted to stay involved. And
Mhm.
kind of gaping holes that we saw in the foster care system. One of them is we wanted to start a like foster mentorship program,
Mm.
because number number one, it does take a village.
Yeah.
And there's so many times that it would be great for you as a foster parent to be able to reach out to somebody who
Mhm.
would pick them up and take them for a day, or
Yeah.
have a relationship,
Yeah.
and many of these kids don't have healthy extended families anyway.
Yeah.
So building that in somehow.
Yeah.
And all of the people that say, oh, we would love to do this, but we really can't have a kid in our house. I'd love to have an option to say, okay, well, you could try this. You're
Mhm.
going to take a little bit of training. We'll go through the background checks with you,
Yeah.
and then just start building some kind of relationship, whatever you
Mhm.
want it to look like, with this kid, so that when they do leave you, when they do move on, they have something, they
Yeah.
have more people in their life than just
Yep.
the foster parents. I think there's a huge need for that. And I think
Mhm.
that's a level that you could bring people in where it's not as scary as
Yeah.
taking, this strange kid into my house and, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And lets them kind of get their feet wet
Yep.
and see that they're just normal kids who are lovable and will
Yep.
add as much to your life as you're adding to theirs. But
Absolutely. That would
that's
be
a program I would.
beautiful. And we were lucky enough. There was one time where we don't have anyone in our family who is qualified to be an alternative caregiver. So spending the night. We're
Mhm.
still working on that with some people. But what that means is that if we can't take foster kiddos, with us on a trip. Like for this particular one, it was John and I going to a concert out of state, and it was just him and I. So our biological kids, you know, you drop them off at Nana's, but, you know, you have to be cleared if, you know, you're going to be having a foster kid staying over for their safety, the kids' safety, that is. And we were lucky enough that one, so that's respite care, which is something we've talked about on the channel before. And some people will get their feet wet with respite care and, you know, be a respite provider. We, at that time, it was an interesting situation. We had been matched with someone who was close to us, who was going to watch her for that weekend. But then there was an issue that came up where their values didn't really match. So it turned out like that didn't work out. But the respite provider who we actually ended up with, they have formed a fairly strong bond. And so now anytime that we're looking for respite, we're always going to her first. And, you know, Miss A actually talks about her, and she's open to, because she's in the area of where her school is, her previous school. So she's offered to take her to basketball games so she can see some of her old friends. And that kind of relationship outside of, you know, us where she's staying is incredibly valuable. And, you know, when and if she's reunified, she has somebody closer to her that she can still reach out to. And that's so, so valuable. So I can totally see a future where that could be possible. So you've never adopted a kid out of foster care. But there have been times where it's been close. So we've talked on the channel where, you know, John and I were foster to adopt. And so primarily we're here to foster kids. If parental rights were terminated, and if it made sense for our family, for the child, we would make that happen. So we don't rule out adoption, but ultimately our goal is to continue to foster. So I know you talked about like early on, you were looking to adopt. Talk about some of those experiences of, you know, things that came close to adoption and all of that.
What originally brought us to adoption was, you know, having a baby girl that could grow up as a sister. And that window kind of closed, you know, just because of the age difference. Because of the dynamics of the family, I think our original idea for finding a sister for Ashley kind of disappeared. You know, later on, there were a couple of kids who they had been in our home for a very long time. They didn't have any hope of reunification, and they wanted to be adopted, and, you know, that's what kind of led us there. And just for a whole variety of reasons, it didn't work. You know, it didn't go smoothly. So I think in looking back, I'm glad, although it was painful at the time, I'm glad it didn't happen, because it's left us open now to have, you know, kind of an ongoing relationship with a lot of these kids. There's a kiddo now who, he was one of the kids that we were going to adopt and then couldn't adopt, and he was adopted by somebody else, and that hasn't worked out. And he and Barry have stayed pretty close. And so he came at Christmas time and spent a couple of weeks with us and said, this is where I belong. This is my family. This is where I want to be. We have to make this happen. So next weekend, he's coming back. He's moving in with us. He's transferring. He's working for Kroger in Columbus. He's getting a transfer so that he can work here. And he's going to stay with us for a period of time until he can get an apartment in the area and, you know, come back to the family that he always felt that he had.
That is awesome.
So it's not an adoption, but definitely at this point in my life, that's where I can be for these kids. You know, and the ones who are now, you know, I feel like I'm a foster grandma now, because 3 of my former kids have children, and so now they're coming back with all different, you know, questions, and I think I can roll into that, and it's just a different phase of my life.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Not to sugarcoat it, there were many, many, many days where we said, what are we doing? You come home, you never know what you're coming home to. You never know who's gonna, you know, have a meltdown or an explosion, or you know, when school's gonna call and say they did blah blah blah. You know, and you, if you have a need for order and, schedule and knowing what's going to happen. This is not it.
Yeah.
This is not where you belong.
Does it surprise you
Because
that I'm a foster parent then? because I'm the order one. I feel like I'm.
and I guess I have to qualify that. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. I am very neat and orderly as far as that's concerned. And that hasn't ever
Yeah.
changed. And I think even the days that we had 7 or 8 kids in the house, that still was there. But I think you just have to be able to roll with it and understand I had this and this planned, but she's really in crisis
Yeah.
today, and so things are going to have to change.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the rigidity that I think you can't have.
You have to be going into it very selfless and very much kids first, and adapting, because we've been there where, if a kid is going through something, you pretty much have to drop everything, and you have to, if you do have a partner or spouse, finding that balance of, okay, I'm gonna handle this, you take care of this. And of course there's people, single foster parents out there who are doing it on their own, but yeah, we've experienced that for sure. Definitely be flexible and adaptable.
And I think that's where there's a rub with your own bio kids, because there is a natural jealousy between the foster kids and the bio kids, and they will test you on that.
Yeah.
Your daughter has a big basketball game, and I know how much you want to go to that, but I'm going to throw this fit right now, and you're going to have to choose between dealing with me and being with her.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff happens.
So
and I don't have a magic answer to that. It's just that's a part of the package that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that it would be easy for us to be just talking about this for as long as we have been. And of course I appreciate you taking the time to do this, especially with it being Foster Care Awareness Month. We have such a small sample size from our experience, and I knew that hearing you share yours would be so beneficial to everybody watching. Is there anything that you would want to share with them, that, a message that you'd like to leave, as they might be thinking about either going down this journey or not, or maybe they're in it? What would you want to share?
I think I talked earlier about wanting to attract the people who are truly best suited, and I still have an interest in that. Another thing that really tugs on my heart is the system fails kids when they're exiting. And that's my heartbreak. If you look at the studies of, underemployment, incarceration, it's bleak. It is really, really bleak. And the way they age out of the system is terrible. That's another program that, Don and I wanted to start at one point, is starting a transitional living program way earlier. If you know that this kid isn't going to be, up for reunification, they're not going to be up for adoption, they're 14, 15, 16, you need to start packing some real honest to goodness life skills into them. Because I know with my own kids, when they were 18, there wasn't one of them that was ready to fly on their own and never look back.
Right.
And they had been raised in a stable home with, they weren't facing what these kids are. And I think the system drops out from underneath them, and it's terrible. What happens to them is terrible. And we have to find, the answer that I always got was money. There's no money for this. They are costing you. They are costing you because they don't get health care. They don't get a decent job. They wind up in prison. They wind up with substance abuse. We're paying big money for that. Why don't we put a little bit of that up front and change the outcome for them? So I think
do not disagree.
Huge need there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Pam, so run with that. Go fix that. Okay.
Okay, I'll go. I'll go and take care of that. Don't you worry.
All right.
Yeah. Hopefully times are changing a little bit. But some of the things that you talk about, like, obviously it's still happening. Well, thank you so much.
No problem.
This has been awesome.
It's been my heart for a long time. I will always talk about it to anybody.